just like that, it's time for our weekly roundup of all the things Lady just ain't gonna do this week. Number 1, keep pushing forward this Crime Bill 2.0 when you really need Black people to turn out in November. So we talked about this last week, but I want to bring it back and actually talk more about this because we're about to make some very basic mistakes that can absolutely be avoided. But it really is all hands on deck in order to make it happen. So look, I want to be super clear. I think this whole entire thing is a bad idea. Period. I was on Roland Martin this week, and one of his guests said, well, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about this bill. I think there's just disagreement. So we're going to break down the disaster that almost happened last week and will almost certainly happen if progressive Democrats and members of the Congressional Black Caucus don't hold the line. And before I go on, can we just take a minute to thank them for what they've been doing thus far? So basically, there were 2 bills. One was co-sponsored by Abigail Spanberger and would have provided additional grant funding to hire more police officers. The other bill, sponsored by Representative Josh Gottheimer, would have provided more assistance for police departments with fewer than 200 police officers. That's a lot of money for police. Now, progressive Democrats and members of the Congressional Black Caucus raised concerns about providing more funding for police without any accountability measures in place, especially since no police reform legislation has passed since the so-called racial reckoning of 2020. Now check this out. Spanberger and Gottheimer, they're both Democrats. Spanberger represents Virginia's 7th District, which is largely the burbs, and Gottheimer represents New Jersey's 5th District, which is, you guessed it, the burbs. Now, these are the folks that Democrats are chasing to try and turn them out for Democrats in November. Never mind that it ain't happening, but they will blame the movement for going too far if and when the suburban voters don't vote for Democrats. And they won't, because they don't share the same values. It's really the elephant in the room that it ain't just Republican voters that vote for racism. So do moderate Democratic voters. So, essentially, the party is chasing racist voters rather than their strongest base who want more services, including public safety services, which include, but almost always are not limited to, police. But also, the base of the Democratic Party wants accountable and responsive policing. Now, I'm not talking about what the activists want. I'm not talking about what the radicals and the revolutionaries want. I'm talking about what your average Black voter aged 35 to 55 wants to see. So, Biden himself was out here in these streets touting a proposal for a Safer Communities Act, which literally takes the same approach as the 1994 crime bill did. And let me explain how before you start to be like, it's not the same. First, the parallel between the 94 crime bill and this Safer Communities Act is that both bills were intended to try and outdo Republicans on crime. But this time, it's a race to see who supports police, Democrats or Republicans. Now, mind you, this is a direct response to certain wings of this party losing their shit over the popularizing of defund the police demands. Now, let me say this. The Biden administration cannot, and I repeat, absolutely cannot afford to have the perception or the fucking reality that they are supporting yet another bill that criminalizes Black people. No, sir, not in the time of fascism. The political pandering to people who do not fucking back you has to stop. We need smart policy and smart people designing that policy. The smart people we need are the folks who are in the street stopping the damn violence. The people who are helping street organizations broker truces for the sake of our communities. The people who are making sure our communities have access to mental health supports and that kind of thing. Those are the people that we need writing policy to address the challenges that we're facing. Now, the political pandering of 30 years ago resulted in devastating impacts on Black communities that we are still fucking reeling from today. And Joe Biden was at the front of that shit. So, if President Biden is at all tied to this, he's literally done with Black voters. Remember when President Biden went on the Breakfast Club to talk to Charlemagne when he was running for president? And he said that anyone who doesn't know his record on Black people ain't Black? Well, sir, if you don't know how moving this proposal would completely fucking torpedo any chances you have of getting widespread Black support in 2024, you don't know Black people. Ignore this sage advice at your own peril. It ain't crime, my friend. It's the economy. We can even venture to say that dealing with the economy could deal with crime. Imagine that. Other things Lady Ain't Gonna Do this week, Brittney Griner is convicted of drug smuggling charges in Russia and sentenced to 9 years. Well, y'all, Brittney Griner was convicted of drug smuggling for having less than a gram of cannabis oil in her suitcase. 9 years. Even her lawyers in Russia said that the average sentence for a crime like this is like 5 years, and that almost a third of people convicted for this are paroled, and that this particular sentence was unique because Griner is an American. So what now? We have to keep pushing the Biden administration not to drop this case, to keep pushing for a prisoner swap. Now, you heard here on this illustrious show that no matter what, this was the process that needed to happen in order for the negotiations between the two countries to proceed. Now that she has been convicted and sentenced, we expect to see a full court press from the Biden administration to get Griner home. We will keep our eyes on this case and keep you up to date on what's happening next. But needless to say, let's be clear about two things. One, Griner is a prisoner of war, a hostage, if you would. We should start referring to her that way. And number two, don't get caught up in being a Russian propagandist of your own sort. This don't have shit to do with a vape cartridge, so save your judging eyes for some other shit. This is literally about a Cold War between two countries, and Griner is just a pawn in that. Other things Lady just ain't gonna do this week. The sad, sad news is that our brother, Albert Woodfox, died this week at age 75. Woodfox spent 43 years in solitary confinement in Angola prison as retaliation for the organizing he was doing there as a member of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Woodfox was one of the Angola three imprisoned people who were targeted for their political organizing. Woodfox died of complications from COVID-19. Now, I had the honor and the privilege of meeting Woodfox not long after he was released. I'm pretty sure it was at the Congressional Black Caucus Legislative Conference. And I was asked at the last minute to participate in a panel discussion with him, and I'm blanking now on who the other people were. But what I remember the most is just staring at him in awe. How does one spend 43 years alone in a cage and still smile and be gentle and kind, curious and humble? I never, ever forgot that day, and I never will. May he rise in power. May his spirit soar. And may we heed the lessons he shared with us about how not to perpetuate the violence and destruction of these evil systems. Whew. Let's move on to things Lady loves this week. Number one, the cops that killed Breonna Taylor are finally charged with motherfucking crimes. Now, let me just start off by saying that Kristen Clark from the Department of Justice is one of the best things to ever fucking happen to them, period. Now, every week I get news about another case that they're pursuing under her leadership, and this one is no different. Today, we learned that the officers that murdered Breonna Taylor, Kyle Meany, Joshua Janes, Brett Hankison, and Kelly Goodlett, were arrested and indicted on various charges related to Taylor's death. Janes and Meany were charged with federal civil rights and obstruction offenses for their roles in preparing and approving a false search warrant affidavit that resulted in Taylor's death. Hankison was charged with civil rights offenses for firing his service weapon into Taylor's apartment through a covered window and a covered glass door. Goodlett was charged with conspiring with Janes to falsify the search warrant for Taylor's home and then to cover up their actions afterwards. It has been more than 875 days since Breonna Taylor was killed. Other things Lady loves this week, Beyonce blessing us, honey, and it's exactly what we needed. Okay, so I couldn't not talk about Beyonce's new album, Renaissance. Lady loves. I'm still wrapping myself up in this album, but suffice it to say, somehow the queen knows exactly what we need when we need it. And honestly, and y'all know how much I love me some Drake, and I'm conflicted about loving me some Drake for all the fucking reasons, but we're gonna talk about that another time. But honestly, Renaissance is way better than Drake's album, period. Other things Lady loves this week, Kansas voters resoundingly reject anti-abortion measures. Well, it looks like Kansas stepped up this week to be the real MVPs as they solidly rejected a measure that tried to remove the right to abortion from the state's constitution. This, of course, comes on the heels of the Supreme Court's decision to basically erode what we knew of as a fundamental right to privacy when it comes to abortion. And that decision at the U.S. Supreme Court essentially opened up the floodgates for states to take it into their own hands, with no mandate from the federal government to have to actually fucking treat people who can get pregnant, as like human beings. Just this week, the Department of Justice sued the state of Idaho for its near total ban on abortions, including a law that prosecutes anyone who performs an abortion with a felony charge that's punishable by 2 to 5 years in prison. So, Kansas, also a Republican-controlled state, is showing us quite a few things. Number 1, people are taking their fight back to the state level and fucking winning. You can absolutely impact what is happening in your own backyard, regardless of whatever fuck shit the Supreme Court is on. Number 2, this could very well be an issue that galvanizes voters, especially Democratic ones. The majority of the country believes that abortion should be legal and should be a decision that is between a person and their doctor. So, it looks like this extreme faction of the party overplayed their hand. Sucks to get your ass handed to you on the home field, but may there be many, many more of those moments in November. Other things that Lady loves this week: August is National Black Census Month, and we need your help. Okay, I'm just needing to tell y'all that me and my crew at the Black Futures Lab are working really hard to conduct the largest survey of Black people in America ever, and we need your help. August is not only Transgender Awareness Month, August is not only Black August, where we put renewed attention toward freeing our political prisoners, but August is also National Black Census Month, where we come together and make sure that all of our voices count. Take the Black Census at www.blackcensus.org and visit our website, blackfutureslab.org, to learn more about how you can participate in the first ever National Black Census Month and make history with us.